Shakira Okafor couldn't remember how she came to. The first thing she felt was cold, piercing, as if her body had been plunged into ice water. Then came the sounds, the monotonous beeping of medical equipment, suddenly becoming chaotic and piercing, the rustle of someone's quick footsteps, someone shouting, "Call Dr. Harris, quick!" She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt heavy, as if weights had been attached to them. When she finally managed to do so, bright light hit her eyes, causing her to close them again immediately. Someone leaned over her, blocking the light. "Mrs. Okafor, can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me." With great effort, Shakira blinked. "Unbelievable," said the same voice. After 5 years, the ward became a flurry of activity. People in white coats came and went, checking readings on monitors, shining flashlights in Shakira's eyes, asking questions she couldn't answer. Her voice wouldn't work, nor would the rest of her body. "Mrs. Okafor, I'm Dr. Harris," said a tall man with graying temples. "You are at the Grapevine Rehabilitation Center. You have been in a coma for 5 years after suffering severe anaphylactic shock. It is a miracle that you have regained consciousness." 5 years. The words echoed in Shakila's mind as the doctors continued to fuss over her. 5 years of her life had disappeared as if they had never existed. She tried to remember the last thing she remembered. Dinner at home. Devante had made pasta with seafood. And then, darkness. "We need to tell your husband," said the nurse, a full-figured black woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Tansha Job. "He'll be overjoyed." Those words should have made Shakira feel warm, but instead she felt a strange uneasiness. Something in Tansha's voice. Insecurity? Doubt? Shakira couldn't explain why, but she suddenly realized she didn't want Devante to know about her awakening. Not now. With great effort, she managed to squeeze out the first words. "No. Don't tell. Him." Tanisha looked at her in surprise. "But Mrs. Okafor, your husband—" "Please," Shakira croaked. Each word came with difficulty, as if she were trying to speak with stones in her mouth. "Not now. Wait." The nurse glanced at Dr. Harris. He frowned, but then nodded. "If the patient asks, we must respect her decision. Mrs. Okafor, are you sure?" Shakira nodded with difficulty. She didn't understand why she was doing this. It was just intuition, a strange premonition she couldn't explain. "All right," said the doctor. "But you have a long road to recovery ahead of you. Your muscles will need time to recover after 5 years of immobility. The support of your loved ones is very important during this period." "I'll manage," Shakira whispered. "Just give me time." Over the next few days, Shakira began the slow and painful process of returning to life. Every movement required incredible effort. The simple act of raising her arm was torture. Her muscles, atrophied from years of immobility, refused to obey her, but she was stubborn. She worked for hours until she was exhausted, until she cried from the pain. "I'll manage," Shakira whispered. "Just give me time." Over the next few days, Shakira began the slow and painful process of returning to life. Every movement required incredible effort. The simple act of raising her arm was torture. Her muscles, atrophied from years of immobility, refused to obey her, but she was stubborn. She worked for hours until she was exhausted, until she cried from the pain. Tansha Jobu became her main helper and support. She was the one who helped Shakira with her exercises, massages, and spongings. During one of these sessions, Shakira decided to ask the question that had been tormenting her. "Tansha, what caused my allergic reaction?" "I remember having dinner at home and then—" "Your medical records say it was peanuts," Tansha replied, gently kneading Shakira's leg muscles. "That's strange that you went into a coma from peanuts because with your allergy, you probably never eat them." Something clicked in Shakira's mind, a fragment of memory, sharp and painful. "I never eat peanuts," she said slowly. "I've had a severe allergy since childhood. Even the smell can trigger a reaction." Then how did it happen? Shakira strained her memory. The last evening before the world went dark, she'd come home late, staying late at the nursery. Devante was waiting for her with dinner. He rarely cooked, but that evening he had gone to great lengths. "Seafood pasta," Shakila recalled. He made pasta with seafood and garlic. Maybe there were traces of peanuts at the restaurant where he bought the ingredients, Tanisha suggested. No, he bought and cooked everything himself, Shakira frowned. I remember the pasta tasted unusual, but the garlic overpowered all the other flavors. The thought that flashed through her mind was so terrible that Shakira immediately dismissed it. No, it was impossible. Devante loved her. He knew about her allergies better than anyone else. He couldn't. Did your husband know about your allergies? Tansha asked, unwittingly voicing Shakila's thoughts. Of course he did, Shakila replied sharply. We've been married for 12 years. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. Small, but disturbing. Tansha, Shakira began cautiously, changing the subject. Did my husband visit me often? The nurse looked away, concentrating on the massage. At first, yes, she replied after a pause. Then, less often. Did he come alone? Tanisha hesitated again. Not always. Sometimes there was a woman with him, his colleague, as he introduced her. Shakira's heart ached. A colleague. How banal. What did she look like? Tall, slim, short hair, braided into thin pigtails. Very pretty. Tansha immediately bit her tongue, realizing she had said too much. I'm sorry, It's okay. Shakira forced herself to smile. Everything's fine. But nothing was fine. Coma, peanuts, colleague. These three facts swirled around in her head, forming a picture she refused to accept. That night, lying in the silence of the hospital room, Shakira made a decision. She would keep quiet. No one, especially Devante, should know that she had regained consciousness. She would train, regain her strength, and when she could move on her own, she would find out the truth. Tansha, she said the next morning when the nurse came to help her with her hygiene routine, I want you to promise me something. What exactly, Mrs. Okafor? Don't tell anyone I've woken up, especially my husband. Tansha looked at her in confusion. But why? He needs to know. I want to surprise him, Shakira forced a smile. When I can walk again, can you imagine how surprised he'll be when I come home on my own? It was a lie, and Tansha probably knew it, but something in Shakira's eyes, determination, desperation, pain, made her nod. All right, I'll talk to Dr. Harris, but you need to understand that rehabilitation will take a long time, months, maybe even a year. I'll be faster than that, Shakira said firmly. I have motivation, and she kept her word. With iron determination, ignoring the pain and fatigue, she forced her body to remember how to move. At first, it was simple exercises in bed, bending and unbending her fingers, wrists, elbows, then attempts to sit up without support, her first steps with a walker along the wall. Every day was a battle with her own body, with gravity, with pain. But Shakira did not give up. She was like a woman possessed. After 2 months, she was able to walk with a cane, not quickly, not gracefully, but on her own. And that was enough for her plan. I want to go out into the city, she told Tanshi. Alone? It's too soon, the nurse objected. You're not strong enough yet. I'm ready, Shakira insisted. I need this, please. After much persuasion and promises to wear a medical bracelet and carry a phone for emergencies, Tansha agreed. Shakira's first outing was like jumping into ice water. The world had changed in 5 years, not drastically, but enough to make her feel like a stranger. New buildings, new stores, people with gadgets she had never seen before. But Grapevine was still the same small Texas town she remembered. Her and Devante's house was a 15-minute walk from downtown, for a healthy person. It took Shakira almost an hour to get there. Every step was difficult, but she stubbornly continued walking, leaning on her cane. The house looked almost the same as she remembered, except that the fence had been repainted from white to light blue, and the flowers in the flower bed were different. Shakira didn't go close. She stopped on the opposite side of the street, in the shade of a large oak tree, and waited. Devante was supposed to be home from work around 5 o'clock, unless his schedule had changed. The clock on the phone Tanisha had given her read 4:30. Shakira braced herself for a long wait. But at 4:45, an unfamiliar car pulled up outside the house and a woman got out. She was tall and slender, with short hair tied back in dozens of thin braids. She opened the door with her key and disappeared inside the house as confidently as if she had done it 1,000 times before. Shakira's heart ached. Who was this woman? Why did she have a key to their house? Thousands of questions swirled in her head, but she stood motionless, like a statue. At 5:10, Devante arrived. Shakira barely recognized her husband. He had gained weight and grown a beard, but most importantly, he looked happy, not at all like a man whose wife had been in a coma for 5 years. He entered the house, and soon the lights came on in the windows. Shakira didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the glowing windows of her home, where another woman now lived. Her legs ached, her back aches, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain that tore her heart apart. In the days that followed, she continued her secret forays. She learned that the woman's name was Nzinga Chimarenka, that she worked as a waitress at the Blue Lotus bar, and that she had apparently been living with Devante for a long time. They looked like a normal, happy couple. They went shopping together, laughed, and held hands. All the neighbors knew them as a couple. But what about Shakila? It was as if she had been forgotten. No one mentioned the woman lying in a coma. It was as if she had never existed. One evening, Shakila stood outside the kitchen window of their house. She could see Nzinga cooking dinner, and Devante sitting at the table with a bottle of beer, telling a funny story. Pieces of their conversation drifted through the open window. "And then this idiot says to me, 'I'm not paying for delivery,'" Devante said, and Nzinga laughed. "No peanuts in the pasta tonight, don't worry," she said, stirring something in the pot. "I don't want you ending up in a coma like your ex." They both laughed, and that laughter sounded like a death sentence to Shakira. Example. That's what she had become. And peanuts? They knew. They both knew. Shakira recoiled from the window, feeling nausea rising in her throat. Now everything fell into place. Pasta with garlic to mask the taste of peanuts. A sudden allergic reaction. A coma. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. A cruel, cold-blooded plan by her husband and his mistress to get rid of her without making a fuss. No divorce, no scandal. Just an accident that would set Devante free to be with Nzinga. But they hadn't counted on one thing. Shakira had survived, and now she knew the truth. Hatred burned in Shakira's heart like acid. That hatred became her fuel, her oxygen, her reason for living. Every morning she woke up with one thought: revenge. And that thought gave her strength when it seemed like her body was refusing to obey her. After that evening, when she overheard Devante and Nzinga talking about peanut butter, Shakira changed her approach to rehabilitation. Slow, careful exercises were no longer enough. She wanted to become strong enough to carry out her revenge. "I want to work with a trainer," she told Tanshi the next day. "A real trainer, not just a physical therapist." "It's too soon," the nurse objected. "Your muscles are still—" "My muscles are fine," Shakira snapped. "I know what I need." After a long argument with Dr. Harris, she got her way. The center hired a personal trainer for her, a young man named Jabari Masimba, who specialized in rehabilitation after serious injuries. Jabari was a tough trainer. He didn't cut Shakil any slack, didn't let her rest when she was tired, didn't feel sorry for her when she moaned in pain. And that was exactly what she needed. 10 more reps, he said when she seemed ready to pass out from exhaustion. "I can't!" Shakira gasped, feeling her legs tremble. "You can." His voice was calm but firm. "What you're looking for is beyond can't." He didn't know what she was looking for. No one did. But Jabari saw in her eyes the same determination he saw in fighters before an important match. He didn't ask questions. He just did his job. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Shakira grew stronger. Her gait, at first uncertain and unsteady, became firmer. Her once powerless arms could now lift dumbbells. She was no longer a shadow of her former self. All this time, she continued to watch Devante and Nzinga. She would leave the center under the pretext of going for a walk, but instead she would go to her former home, to the Blue Lotus bar where Nzinga worked, to the supermarket where Devante worked as a stalker. She gathered information bit by bit, like a detective investigating a crime. She learned that Devante and Nzinga had met 6 months before she fell into a coma, that they had had a whirlwind romance, which they had kept secret, That Nzinga wanted Devante to leave his wife, but he was hesitant. Divorce would mean dividing their property, scandal, and possibly losing the house he and Shakira had bought together. And then a plan emerged. A plan that Shakil overheard during one of her surveillance missions, when Nzinga was talking on the phone with her friend while standing in the backyard of a bar during a break. "You have no idea how scary it was," Nzinga said, smoking a cigarette. "I thought she'd just feel sick, spend a couple of days in the hospital, and then Devo and I would go to that festival like we planned. But when I saw the news, you have no idea how scared I was. I thought we were going to get arrested." Pause. Nzinga listened to the person on the other end of the line. "Of course, it was my idea with the peanuts. He would never have thought of that. But I didn't want to kill her. Just get her out of the way for a while." Another pause. "No, he'll never find out. I'm not stupid enough to write something like that down or tell anyone." Shakira, hiding behind some trash cans a few meters away from Nzinga, clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms until they bled. Now she had a confession. Not one she could use in court, but enough for herself. That evening, when she returned to the center, she told Jabari, "I'm ready. I want to go home." He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to read her thoughts. "You're physically ready," he said slowly, "but there are other kinds of readiness." "I know what I'm doing," Shakira replied, her voice as firm as steel. Jabari nodded. He never meddled in other people's business, but now something in this woman's eyes, a cold determination bordering on obsession, made him feel uneasy. "Shakira," he said, calling her by her first name for the first time instead of Mrs. Okafor. "Whatever you're planning, think twice." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I always do." The next day, Shakira officially checked out of the rehab center. For the first time in all this time, the center contacted Devante to share the good news. His wife had come out of her coma and was ready to come home. He came to pick her up in the same car Shakil had seen before, apparently belonging to Nzinga. He looked confused and nervous, not at all like a happy husband reunited with his beloved wife after a long separation. "Shakil," he said, awkwardly hugging her. You look good." "Thank you," she replied, allowing herself to be embraced and not betraying the storm raging inside her. "I'm so glad to see you, Devon." The drive home was awkwardly silent. Devon tried to pretend everything was normal, talking about the changes in the city over the years, his work, the weather, anything but what really mattered. He didn't mention Nzinga once. When they pulled up to the house, Shakira noticed that Nzinga's car was gone, as were all of her things, presumably. Devante had prepared for his wife's return by removing all traces of his mistress. "The house hasn't changed much," Shakira said as she stepped inside and looked around. That was only half true. The furniture was the same, but there were new paintings, new cushions on the sofa, new curtains, all in a style that was clearly not hers. "Yes, I tried to keep everything as it was," Devante replied uncertainly. "You must be tired from the trip. Would you like to rest?" "No, I'd like to look around. Remember how to live a normal life." She wandered around the house, touching things, opening cupboards, pulling out drawers. In the bedroom, she discovered that Devante had slept on her side of the bed. The pillow had a dent where his head had been. On the bedside table was a book she definitely hadn't bought. In the bathroom was an unfamiliar coconut-scented shampoo. All these little details, these traces of someone else's life in her home, only fueled her anger. But Shakira didn't know exactly how she would get revenge. She didn't have a specific plan, just a burning desire to make Devante and Nzinga pay for what they had done. That evening, Devante made dinner, chicken pasta, carefully avoiding any seafood. Shakira noticed how nervous he was when she picked up her first fork. "Don't worry," she said with a smile. "I trust you." He laughed awkwardly and looked away. They spent the evening in front of the TV, pretending everything was normal, that they were still a married couple, that there weren't 5 years and betrayal between them. When it was time for bed, Devante said hesitantly, "I can sleep in the living room if you—" "No," Shakira interrupted him. "It's fine. We're husband and wife, right?" He nodded. clearly relieved that she wasn't complicating things. If only he knew what thoughts were racing through her mind as she lay next to him, listening to his steady breathing. The next few days passed in a strange imitation of normal life. Shakila cooked, cleaned the house, watched TV, everything she had done before the coma. Devante went to work, came home in the evening, and they had dinner together. From the outside, they looked like a normal couple settling into life after a long separation. But inside, Shakira was boiling. She watched Devante, studying his new habits, his schedule. She noticed how often he checked his phone, how quickly he responded to messages. Probably from Nzingi. They must have agreed to keep their distance while Shakira adjusted. And then, what? Would he ask for a divorce? Or would they come up with a new way to get rid of her? On the third day after returning home, Shakira noticed that Devante was having car trouble. The old Ford they had when she fell into a coma seemed to be finally giving up the ghost. "The damn engine is stalling again," he complained at dinner. "I'll have to work on it over the weekend." Shakira nodded, continuing to eat. But something clicked inside her. The car, the garage, weekends when the neighbors usually left town. "I can help," she offered. "I used to hand you tools." "No, don't," Devin replied quickly. "It's dirty, and you're not fully recovered yet." She didn't insist, but the idea had already taken root in her mind, vague and unformed but already taking shape. On Saturday morning, Devante kept his promise and started working on the car. Shakila could hear him in the garage, banging around with his tools and occasionally swearing. She pretended to be busy cleaning, but she was actually listening intently to the sounds coming from the garage. Around noon, she made sandwiches and cold tea. "I'll bring you a snack," she called from the garage door. "Thanks," Devin replied. "Just give me 5 minutes. I'm almost done with the carburetor." Shakira waited, then opened the door and entered the garage. Devin was standing by the open hood, wiping his hands with a rag. "Here," she said, handing him the tray. "How's it going?" "I figured out the carburetor, but I think the problem is with the brake system," he said, taking a sandwich and biting off a large piece with gusto. "I'll have to get under the car." Shakira felt a chill run down her spine. Under the car, of course. A man under a heavy car held up only by a flimsy jack, one push and... "Are you using a jack?" she asked as casually as possible. "The old red one?" "Yes, it's reliable," Devin nodded, finishing his tea. "It's been through worse." "Be careful," Shakila said, taking the empty glass. "I'm going to the store to get some food for dinner. Any requests?" "Whatever you like," he said, already turning back to the car, having lost interest in her. Shakira left the garage, quietly closing the door behind her. Her heart was beating so hard that it felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. The plan, which hadn't existed a minute ago, suddenly appeared before her in all its clarity. It was so simple that it was strange she hadn't thought of it before. She went up to her bedroom, changed her clothes, grabbed her bag, and went downstairs. She said loudly enough for Devin to hear through the garage door, "I'm going to the store. I'll be back in an hour." But instead of going out the front door, she quietly made her way through the kitchen to the back door. From there, she skirted around the house and crept up to the small side door of the garage that led to the garden. This door was almost never used and was partially hidden by hydrangea bushes. Shakira opened it carefully, trying not to make a sound. Inside the garage, it was dark and smelled of oil. She saw Devante's legs sticking out from under the car. He was lying on a small trolley that he had made himself many years ago. The car was jacked up a few inches, just enough for him to work under it. The red jack was on the right side of the car, near the rear wheel. Devante couldn't see it from where he was. "Baby, did you decide not to go to the store after all?" he asked when he heard footsteps. Shakira didn't answer. Looking back, she noticed the tire iron lying on the workbench. Heavy, solid, with a curved end, the perfect weapon. She picked it up silently and walked over to the jack. "Shakira?" Devin's voice sounded alarmed. "Is that you?" She remembered their last dinner before she fell into a coma, pasta with seafood and garlic, an unusual taste that she hadn't recognized at the time, peanuts that could have killed her. That almost did. She remembered Nzinga's words. Of course, it was my idea with the peanuts. He would never have thought of that. She remembered 5 years of darkness, 5 years stolen from her life. Swinging the crowbar, she struck the jack joint with all her might. Metal clanged against metal. The jack shook, but held. Without hesitation, Shakira struck again, putting all her hatred into the blow, all the months of training with Jabari, all the pain of 5 lost years. This time the jack collapsed with a loud screech, and the car fell. Devante's scream ended as suddenly as it had begun. The sound was like a watermelon being crushed. Shakira couldn't see his head, only his legs, which jerked as if from an electric shock. Then the convulsions began. His legs twitched, his heels pounding the concrete floor of the garage. There were wet, gurgling sounds coming from under the car, the sounds of a man trying to breathe through crushed lungs and a throat filled with blood. Shakira stood motionless, watching this agony with cold, detached interest. She felt neither pity nor disgust, only satisfaction at a job well done. The convulsions lasted about 3 minutes. Then the legs twitched violently and went still. The wheezing subsided. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the garage wall and the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. Shakira moved closer and leaned over to look under the car. What she saw would once have made her scream in horror or lose consciousness. But not now. Now she looked at what was left of her husband's head and felt only a sense of completion. Justice had prevailed. She straightened up and looked around. She carefully placed the jack back on the workbench. There was no blood or other traces on it. The jack was crushed and pinned under the weight of the car, exactly how it should have looked if it had actually broken under the weight of the vehicle. A perfect accident. Shakira left the garage through the same door she had entered, carefully closing it behind her. She walked around the house and headed for the supermarket, which was a 10-minute walk away. She walked at a steady pace, breathing deeply to calm her pounding heart. In the store, she methodically gathered ingredients for dinner: meat, vegetables, fruit, bread. She paid at the checkout, where the chatty cashier remarked, "The weather is great today, isn't it?" "Yes, wonderful," Shakira replied with a smile. It was the perfect alibi. She would be remembered as a regular customer in a good mood. On her way home, she stopped at a small coffee shop and bought a cup of cappuccino. She sat there for 15 minutes, leafing through a magazine and exchanging pleasantries with the barista. More witnesses to her calm, measured Saturday afternoon. When Shakira finally returned home, a little over an hour had passed since she had gone to the store. She entered through the front door, put the grocery bags on the kitchen table, and only then called out, "Devante, I'm home. Want some help with the bags?" Silence. "Devante?" Again, silence. Now she added a note of concern to her voice. "Devante, where are you?" Shakira slowly walked toward the garage, still calling her husband. She opened the door and froze in the doorway, staring at the motionless legs sticking out from under the car. "Oh my God," she whispered, then screamed. "Oh my God, Devon!" She rushed to the car and fell to her knees next to her husband's legs, trying unsuccessfully to look under the undercarriage. "Devon! Devon, can you hear me?" She jumped to her feet and ran out of the garage, shouting for help. A neighbor who was watering flowers on her porch turned at the sound. "Help!" Shakira shouted. "A car has fallen on my husband! Call an ambulance!" The neighbor dropped her watering can and rushed into her house to call for help. Shakira returned to the garage and fell to her knees again next to Devante's body, sobbing and repeating his name. 15 minutes later, the ambulance and police arrived. Firefighters lifted the car with special jacks. The doctor pronounced him dead. It was obvious. The police officer asked Shakira a few questions. "Were you home when it happened?" "No," she said, sobbing. "I went to the store. Here." She pointed to the grocery bags in the kitchen. "I came back and found him. Just like this." "Did he often repair the car himself?" "Yes, almost always. He was very good with mechanics." The officer nodded, looking at the crumpled jack under the car. "Looks like the jack couldn't handle the weight. We see this a lot. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Okafor." Shakira nodded, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. The perfect accident. No one would ever know the truth. She had avenged the 5 stolen years of her life, and now she was free. Detective Quincy Azakevi didn't like Saturdays. On Saturdays, decent people rested. and indecent people committed all sorts of indecency. That's why the Grapevine police always had a lot of work to do on Saturdays. And Azike, as the most experienced detective on the force, got the most difficult cases. Today, just as he was about to go home after a hard shift, a call came in about a fatal accident on Maple Street. "Accident in a garage," said Captain Taylor, handing him a folder. "A man was crushed by a car, most likely a faulty jack." "Why can't it wait until Monday?" Azikev asked wearily. "If it's an obvious accident." "It's a delicate matter." The captain lowered his voice. "The victim's wife recently came out of a 5-year coma. You understand? Insurance, inheritance. I need someone with your experience to make sure everything is above board." Azikev sighed and took the folder. Such was his fate, listening to stories of misfortune, looking at dead bodies, and dealing with human baseness. In 20 years of police work, he had seen it all, but he still hadn't learned to be indifferent to other people's grief. When he pulled up to the Okafor house, medics and forensic experts were already at work. Neighbors had gathered in the street, whispering and staring curiously at the police cars. It was a familiar scene, one family's tragedy becoming entertainment for the whole neighborhood. Azikev approached the officer on duty at the entrance. "Detective Azikev," he introduced himself, showing his badge. "What do we have here?" "A man, 35 years old, crushed by a car in his own garage," the officer reported. "Presumably the jack broke. His wife found the body when she returned from the store." "Where is she now?" "In the house with a paramedic. She's in shock." Azikev nodded and headed for the garage. Winston, a forensic expert with 30 years of experience, whom everyone at the station called the Old Vulture, was working there. The firefighters had already lifted the car with special jacks, and the body of the deceased lay on the floor covered with a tarp. "Hey, Quincy," Winston greeted him without looking up from his work. "Lousy way to die, huh?" "Every way is lousy," Azikev replied. "What do you think?" "Classic case. The car fell on his head and chest. Death was not instantaneous. There are signs of agony. I'd say he lived another 2 or 3 minutes before he choked on his own blood." Azikev crouched down and lifted the edge of the tarp. What he saw made him wince, despite all his experience. The victim's head was practically flattened, his face unrecognizable. "Time of death? Between 1 and 2 days ago. I'll be more precise after the autopsy." Azikev nodded and walked over to the car. The red jack was crushed and bent under the weight of the vehicle. "Old model," Winston remarked, following the detective's gaze. "They break down a lot. The guy should have used jack stands." Was he an experienced mechanic? Judging by the tools and the condition of the garage, he was an amateur. He probably didn't know all the safety rules. Azikev carefully examined the garage. Everything looked exactly as it should have after an accident. Tools scattered about, the hood open, the trolley on which the victim had been lying while working under the car. Nothing unusual. "Anything else?" he asked Winston. "Nothing remarkable. A classic accident like dozens I've seen before. The only thing that makes it special is the story about his wife." "What's that?" "She just woke up from a 5-year coma. Sounds like a Hollywood movie, huh? Wakes up after 5 years and a few days later her husband dies. Talk about bad luck." Azikev nodded thoughtfully. It was a strange coincidence. "I'll go talk to her." Shakila Okafor sat in the kitchen, clutching a cup of untouched tea. She was a beautiful woman with regular features and large, expressive eyes, now red from crying. Next to her sat a paramedic, a young woman who was whispering something to her. When Azikev entered, they both looked up. "Mrs. Okafor, I'm Detective Quincy Azikev," he introduced himself. "My condolences. I understand this isn't the best time, but I need to ask you a few questions." Shakira nodded. The paramedic looked questioningly at Azikev. "You can leave us," he said. "I'll call you if I need you." When they were alone, Azikev sat down across from Shakira and took out his notebook. "Tell me what happened today," he asked gently. Shakira took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. "Devante was working on the car in the garage. It's been breaking down a lot lately. Around noon I brought him a snack and he said he was going to check the brakes." I decided to go to the store to get some groceries for dinner. I left around 1 o'clock. On the way, I stopped by the coffee shop. I got home. I don't remember exactly, maybe around 2:15. I called out to Devante, but he didn't answer. I went to the garage and her voice trembled, and I saw him under the car. I knew right away that something terrible had happened. I screamed and called for help. Mrs. Fowler, our neighbor, heard me and called an ambulance, but it was too late. Did you hear any unusual noises when you got home? Screams? Banging? Shakira shook her head. No, nothing. Everything was quiet. Did your husband often repair the car himself? Yes, he loved working on cars. He always said it helped him relax. Was he an experienced mechanic? Not a professional, but experienced enough for home repairs. He worked as a stocker at a supermarket. Azikeva nodded, making notes in his notebook. I know you just came out of a coma, he said. That must have been a difficult time for both of you. For a moment, he thought he saw something like anger flash across Shakil's eyes, but the expression disappeared so quickly that he wasn't sure if he had imagined it. Yes, it was difficult, she said quietly. 5 years is a long time. We've both changed. How did you end up in a coma? Anaphylactic shock. I have a severe peanut allergy. And you accidentally ate something with peanuts? Shakila hesitated slightly before answering. I guess so. I don't remember the incident itself. The doctors say it's normal to lose your memory of the events immediately preceding the trauma. Aziki made a few more notes. Something about this story bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it yet. Mrs. Okafor, did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to harm him? Shakira raised her eyebrows in surprise. Enemies? No, of course not. Devante was a kind man. Everyone loved him. What about other women? Azakiv asked, watching her reaction closely. Shakira lowered her eyes. I know he had a woman while I was in a coma, she said quietly, but I don't blame him. 5 years is a long time to wait. Do you know her name? No, Shakira shook her head. He didn't talk about her and I didn't ask. We were trying to start with a clean slate. Azikeva nodded, though something in her voice made him doubt the sincerity of her words. Well, thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Okafor, he said, closing his notebook. If you remember anything else that might be important, please give me a call. He left her his card and stepped outside. The neighbor, Mrs. Fowler, was still standing outside her house, clearly waiting for an opportunity to talk to the police. Azakiv approached her. Did you call an ambulance, ma'am? Yes, I did, nodded Mrs. Fowler, a small, elderly woman with gray hair. I was watering my flowers when I heard Shakil screaming. The poor thing was beside herself. Have you known the Okafor family for long? Oh, 10 years at least. They moved in shortly after they got married. They were such a nice couple. And then this terrible thing happened to Shakira. Devante was beside himself. Did you keep in touch with him while his wife was in a coma? Of course, we're neighbors. I brought him dinner sometimes and asked how he was doing. The first year was really bad. He drank a lot and hardly ever left the house. Then he seemed to pull himself together. He started going to work again and even smiled sometimes. And then this woman appeared. What woman? Azakiwe immediately became alert. Did you keep in touch with him while his wife was in a coma? Of course, we're neighbors. I brought him dinner sometimes and asked how he was doing. The first year was really bad. He drank a lot and hardly ever left the house. Then he seemed to pull himself together. He started going to work again and even smiled sometimes. And then this woman appeared. What woman? Azakiwe immediately became alert. His new girlfriend. Mrs. Fowler lowered her voice, even though there was no one around. At first, she just came over to visit. Then she started staying overnight, and then she moved in with him. She's tall and slim with short braids. She's definitely not from around here. She's too posh. Do you know her name? Nzinga, I think. It's an unusual name. I've never heard it before. His new girlfriend. Mrs. Fowler lowered her voice, even though there was no one around. At first, she just came over to visit. Then she started staying overnight, and then she moved in with him. She's tall and slim with short braids. She's definitely not from around here. She's too posh. Do you know her name? Nzinga, I think. It's an unusual name. I've never heard it before. Did she live with Devante until Shakira came back? Yes, but as soon as Shakira came out of the coma, she moved out. I think Devante asked her to leave. He was a married man, after all. Azikev asked a few more questions, but Mrs. Fowler had little to add. She hadn't seen or heard anything unusual on the day of the incident, except for Shakira's screams when she discovered her husband's body. Did she live with Devante until Shakira came back? Yes, but as soon as Shakira came out of the coma, she moved out. I think Devante asked her to leave. He was a married man, after all. Azikev asked a few more questions, but Mrs. Fowler had little to add. She hadn't seen or heard anything unusual on the day of the incident, except for Shakira's screams when she discovered her husband's body. Back at the station, Azikev began gathering information. Nzinga Chimarenka, 29 years old, works as a waitress at the Blue Lotus bar. No police reports, no fines. Clean as a whistle, at least on paper. Back at the station, Azikev began gathering information. Nzinga Chimarenka, 29 years old, works as a waitress at the Blue Lotus bar. No police reports, no fines. Clean as a whistle, at least on paper. Shakira Okafor, 30 years old, former kindergarten teacher. 5 years ago, she was hospitalized with severe anaphylactic shock. Doctors fought for her life for several days, but she fell into a coma. The prognosis was grim, but 3 months ago, a miracle happened. She regained consciousness. After intensive rehabilitation, she was discharged home just a week ago. Shakira Okafor, 30 years old, former kindergarten teacher. 5 years ago, she was hospitalized with severe anaphylactic shock. Doctors fought for her life for several days, but she fell into a coma. The prognosis was grim, but 3 months ago, a miracle happened. She regained consciousness. After intensive rehabilitation, she was discharged home just a week ago. Devante Okafor, 35 years old, stock clerk at Foodway Supermarket. No record, no fines, just a regular hard worker, like millions of others. At first glance, it looked like a classic accident. An inexperienced amateur mechanic didn't follow safety rules and an old jack gave way. These things happen all the time. But something bothered Azikev. Devante Okafor, 35 years old, stock clerk at Foodway Supermarket. No record, no fines, just a regular hard worker, like millions of others. At first glance, it looked like a classic accident. An inexperienced amateur mechanic didn't follow safety rules and an old jack gave way. These things happen all the time. But something bothered Azikev. The next day, he decided to talk to Nzinga Chimarenga. He found her at the Blue Lotus bar where she worked the morning shift. It was an unremarkable establishment on the outskirts of town with worn-out couches and dim lighting. The next day, he decided to talk to Nzinga Chimarenga. He found her at the Blue Lotus bar where she worked the morning shift. It was an unremarkable establishment on the outskirts of town with worn-out couches and dim lighting. Nzinga was indeed beautiful. Tall, slender, with short hair braided into thin pigtails and strikingly bright eyes. She stood out among the bar patrons like an exotic flower in a field of weeds. "Miss Chimarenka," Azikev said, showing her his badge. "Detective Quincy Azikai, can I talk to you?" Nzinga was indeed beautiful. Tall, slender, with short hair braided into thin pigtails and strikingly bright eyes. She stood out among the bar patrons like an exotic flower in a field of weeds. "Miss Chimarenka," Azikev said, showing her his badge. "Detective Quincy Azikai, can I talk to you?" She glanced quickly at the manager, who nodded, and led Azikai to a free table in the corner of the room. "How can I help you, detective?" she asked, sitting down opposite him. "I'm investigating the death of Devante Okafor," Azikev said, watching her reaction. Nzinga paled. "Devante is dead? When? How?" "Yesterday afternoon. An accident in the garage, didn't you know?" She glanced quickly at the manager, who nodded, and led Azikai to a free table in the corner of the room. "How can I help you, detective?" she asked, sitting down opposite him. "I'm investigating the death of Devante Okafor," Azikev said, watching her reaction. Nzinga paled. "Devante is dead? When? How?" "Yesterday afternoon. An accident in the garage, didn't you know?" "No, she faltered. "We hadn't been in touch lately, not since his wife came out of a coma." "But you were close before that, right?" Nzinga tensed. "We were seeing each other, yes, but it ended when Shaquille woke up. Devante said he needed to give their marriage another chance." I understood and left. How did you meet Devante? He used to come to the bar after work. At first he was just a customer, but then we started talking. He told me about Shakira and how hard it was for him without her. We became friends and then more than friends. When was that? About 4 years ago, a year after Shaquille fell into a coma. And you've been together all these years. Yes. Nzinga lowered her eyes. I know what you're thinking, that I broke up a family. But Devante was so lonely, so lost. I just wanted to help him. Azikiwe pretended to write down her words, but he was actually watching her face closely. What do you know about how Shakira ended up in a coma? Nzinga flinched slightly. Only that she had an allergic reaction. Something with peanuts, I think. Did Devante ever talk about the details? No, it was too painful for him to talk about it. Azikev nodded, making notes. Do you think Shakira knew about your relationship with her husband? I'm not sure, Nzinga replied cautiously. Devante told her he had someone else while she was in a coma, but he didn't name names. He wanted to spare her any unnecessary pain. That's noble of him, Azakiv remarked. Did you ever meet Shakira? Before or after she woke up? No, never, Nzinga replied quickly. Too quickly for Azakiwe's liking. Are you sure? Maybe you saw her by chance? In town? Near your house? Nzinga hesitated. I'm not sure. I think I might have seen someone who looked like her near the bar a few weeks ago, but it could have been someone else. And you didn't approach her or talk to her? Of course not. Nzinga looked genuinely indignant. I would never do that. It would be cruel. Azakiwe nodded, though he noted internally that her reaction was too emotional for a casual observation. One last question, Miss Chimarenga. Did you ever joke with Devante about peanuts? Perhaps in the context of his wife's allergy? Nzinga froze. A look of fear flashed across her face, quickly replaced by confusion. What? No, of course not. That would be awful. Why are you asking? Just checking the details, Azikev replied casually. Thank you for your help, Miss Chimarenga. If you remember anything else that might be important, please give me a call. He left her his card and left the bar, feeling that he was finally onto something. Something was definitely wrong with this story, and that something had to do with peanuts and Shakil's coma. Azikev decided to check the medical records. The hospital wouldn't show him the documents without a warrant, but he used his charm and old connections to gain access to Shakira Okafor's medical history. What he read made him frown. On the night Shakira was admitted to the hospital, Devante claimed they had been having dinner at home when she suddenly felt ill. He called an ambulance, but by the time the paramedics arrived, she was already unconscious. Doctors diagnosed severe anaphylactic shock, presumably caused by contact with peanuts. But there was an interesting detail in the attending physician's notes. The patient has a long history of peanut allergies and has always been extremely cautious. It is strange that she could have accidentally consumed the allergen. This confirmed Azakiva's vague suspicions. What if Shaquille's coma wasn't an accident? What if Devante, who was already dating Nzinga, or planning to, deliberately slipped peanuts into his wife's food to get rid of her without a messy divorce? But even if that was the case, what did it have to do with Devante's death? Could someone have known about his actions and sought revenge? Or Azakiv suddenly stopped in the middle of his office, struck by a sudden thought. What if it was Shakira? What if she somehow found out the truth about her coma and decided to take revenge? He returned to his notes. Shakira had been discharged from the rehabilitation center just a week ago. Devante died 3 days after she returned home. Too close a coincidence to be a coincidence. But how could she have found out the truth? From whom? And more importantly, how could he prove her involvement if it really was murder and not an accident? Azakiv decided to talk to Shakira again. He found her at home, dressed all in black, preparing for Devante's funeral, which was to take place the next day. I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Okafor, he said. I have some more questions. Shakira invited him into the house. They sat down in the living room, and Azikeve noticed that all the photos of Devante had been taken down from the walls and shelves. You're not wasting any time, he remarked, nodding at the empty spaces where the frames had once stood. It's hard for me to see them, Shakira replied quietly. It's too painful. I understand. Azakiv nodded. Mrs. Okafor, I wanted to ask you about your coma. You said you don't remember the events immediately preceding it, but maybe some memories came back to you after you woke up? Shakira tensed slightly. No, nothing specific. Just vague images, sensations. Has anyone told you about that evening? Devante, perhaps, or one of the medical staff? Devante didn't like to talk about it, and the doctors only said that I had gone into anaphylactic shock from contact with peanuts. And you weren't surprised that you, a person with a severe allergy who had avoided peanuts your entire life, suddenly ended up in a coma because of them? Shakira looked at Azakiv for a long time before answering. Life is full of strange coincidences, detective. So is death. Indeed, Azakiv agreed. For example, what a strange coincidence that your husband died just 3 days after you returned home, after you spent 5 years in a coma. What are you implying, detective? Shakira's voice took on a metallic tone. I'm not implying anything, Mrs. Okafor. I'm just stating facts. Just like the fact that it wasn't in your husband's best interest for you to fall into a coma 5 years ago. Divorce would have meant a division of property, a scandal, an accident. Well, accidents happen. Shakira paled. Are you accusing my late husband of deliberately causing my allergic reaction? And you think that's impossible? Azakiwe asked, watching her closely. Shakira was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, No, I don't. And if you found out that it was true, how would you feel? Anger, Shakila replied without hesitation. Rage. A desire. She stopped herself. But that's all hypothetical, isn't it, detective? Of course, Azakiwe nodded. Purely hypothetical. He stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Okafor. And again, my condolences. At the door, he turned around. You know, Mrs. Okafor, in my career, there have been many cases where I knew exactly who committed the crime, but I couldn't prove it. Sometimes I think maybe that's for the best. Maybe sometimes justice finds its way without the law getting involved. Shakira didn't answer, but her eyes met Azakiwe's for a moment, and he saw understanding there. They both knew the truth. They both knew that Devante and Nzinga had deliberately caused Shakira's allergic reaction to get rid of her. And they both knew that Shakira had taken revenge by knocking the jack out from under the car and watching the man who had stolen 5 years of her life die. But it was impossible to prove. There were no witnesses, no direct evidence, just a broken jack and a crushed skull, a classic accident, the kind that happens dozens of times every year. As he walked to his car, Azakiva decided that tomorrow he would close the case. He would write accident in the report and send it to the archives. After all, as Shakira had said, life is full of strange coincidences. So is death.